Do you work in the technology industry? Let me ask you this. How many women work in your team? How many women work in leadership roles in your company? Do you think about diversity or what it means to be a woman in tech? Do you worry about it? If you are worried, do you take any steps to change anything? I find the least I can do is listen. And this is what I will do today in this episode. I will interview Jennifer Larson, an executive in the tech industry with over 20 years of experience, so she can tell us about her journey in technology, why diversity matters, why education is important, and where do we go from here. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be here, and it's a topic that I really do truly have a lot of passion and a lot of experience on. So I'm excited to be here and talk about it.
Very good. Jennifer, can you share your personal journey as a woman in tech and how it shaped your perspective on diversity in the industry?
Absolutely. So it's interesting when I read the question, I was kind of putting some ideas about it, my personal journey, right? So starting when you're 21, 22, back in the very, late 90s, early 2000s, um, the word of diversity really didn't exist. And so when I started looking through it, I'm like, all right, well, if I look at my journey and look at the leaders that I had, right, I had some phenomenal leaders, both men and women, strong women, really resilient early on in their careers, helping, mentor before I think there was even like a mentorship, terminology as well. And along with some amazing men who, from either being a manager or if I was a consultant, consulting with them, and just who really believed in me and I think helped, and I know helped to, grow into who I am today. However, when I reflected on that journey, I also am thankful for the leaders who I would maybe not put into like the phenomenal leader camp, right? So we've all had leaders that were really good and strong and helped us to grow in our career, but there were also those leaders who, if I look back on, were not great, but I still learned a lot from them, right? I grew from the adversity of dealing with those people, along with, persevering through difficult conversations. And when you really do a deep reflection on that, for me, it was, kind of what I've said in the past. I know you and I have had conversations is, I got experience that, you know, when I didn't get what I wanted, or was put in a situation or environment that wasn't, something that you had wanted, but I learned a lot from it. So kind of going back to the saying of like, you learn more when lose than when you win. So again, I think, even reflecting on a journey from, having some amazing clients and coworkers, there were also situations in my journey, if I'm really, you know, honest, where I was put into a situation where it had me questioning, did I do something for that, man to say that or to do that or to, and again, I'm grown more now to go, okay, that wasn't me, right? They were being inappropriate. It wasn't anything I did. But again, it was the adversity of working through that and learning a lot through that and really making me who I am today. So the diversity from where it was when I began my career to where I am today in my journey is very different, but in a good way. So.
Very good. So you had good leaders, you had bad leaders, you learned from both, and you went through situations where some men said inappropriate things. Is that mostly where you have seen some of the issues in your career, mostly about inappropriate behavior, or also about opportunities and just who gets to be on the table, on the leadership table, etc. What are the things that you've seen that impacted diversity?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think there's different categories that you could put into place as far as diversity, right? There's sometimes the inappropriateness of situations you need to deal with. But there's also I've been in environments where, I'm working with a colleague who happens to be male, and the conversation of promotion or whatever comes up and your name isn't even at the table, but it's really hard to understand why, right? It's like, again, if I look at what, my colleagues are doing versus what I'm doing, it's the same. So shouldn't I at least have a conversation? Like, shouldn't I have at least the opportunity? I'm not saying I'm the best fit. I may not be. Um, but without the conversation, we don't really know. And so the answer, it's kind of like, if you don't ask the question, the answer is no. It's kind of the same scenario in this. If you're not looking at, your overall team and bringing them all to the table to evaluate, there's biases there. So absolutely, I've had that. Even early on in my career where I thought maybe I should have been somewhere, in a role that, I wasn't quite yet. Um, yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Um, how do you think empathy plays a crucial role in the workplace, especially when addressing the unique challenges faced by women in technology?
Yeah, I love that question. Empathy, in my opinion, plays a huge role along, and I'll kind of couple that with awareness. So when women can share their experiences, it provides a connection which empowers women. And again, this is my opinion and my experiences, but empowers women to face those challenges together, along with helping to recognize the issues at hand and advocating for one another, right? If I'm in a team and it's all men, having one of my male colleagues have empathy for my situation is probably going to be less than if it was another woman. And again, I have three boys. I'm married to a wonderful husband. I have nothing like men are great. There's many things that are great about men, but having that empathy from another woman, it just helps you. Again, I think there's like I'll probably talk about it more because again, it's become a bigger topic than I think it ever has been in my career, is that psychological safety, right? So when I feel empathy with another woman, I have that connection. And when you are aware of what is happening and have that connection, you're feeling more educated and strong. It helps you to have a voice where you may not have otherwise had. So I think it, in my opinion, again, empathy plays a huge role also with mentoring women in tech. Providing the opportunity for mentorships, being a role model for younger women in tech, helping them navigate, career decisions. I had an opportunity to do that at a company I was at, and the young woman that I was paired with, she reminded me a lot of myself when I was in early on in my career. But it was just, we connected. I listened. I had empathy and I encouraged. And she ended up doing something that she never thought she would do, and it worked to her advantage. Right? There's that connection in that. And so to me, empathy it's huge. It's a big part along with the awareness side.
And so we've come a long way, right? When you were starting at the beginning of the 2000 diversity, maybe nobody was really talking about it the way that they do today. So today there are many initiatives. People talk about it in a different way, but what are some of the things that still are not working, and what are some of the biggest challenges that women face today?
Yeah, I think, and I agree. I mean, it's funny, you kind of think back to early on in your career, and it's not like the word diversity did not exist, but the emphasis around it did not, right? I mean, not even to, I would say 1%. Um, but well, there has been a ton of progress, right? I definitely, again, well, it's not just my opinion. There are stats and facts around the pandemic having a huge impact on that progress, right? I mean, women, I had read a stat that was stating, in 2020, or I'm sorry, 2022, the participation rate of women with children under 18 had declined pretty significantly compared to men still being at 93%. So again, I think it wasn't just children, right? There were a lot of different dynamics from the pandemic that I think had kind of taken that progress. And while it maybe some say it halted it. I think it actually decreased it a little bit and kind of took a couple steps backwards. So I think we're on the right, I've seen a lot. I know a lot. I'm educating myself to try to be better in that too. So I think we're going forward again, but I think there are still biases, gender biases when it comes to hiring, promotions, even the day-to-day interactions in the workplace. Again, if I look at early on in my career to today, has it decreased? Absolutely. But you still see a ton of lack of representation of women in leadership roles. And take it a step further, I mean, really the lack of representation of women in color, right? When you look at women in color in the leadership roles, even technical teams, being someone at the table making those decisions in the tech world, it's very apparent and aware that there's a lot of work to do. And I think with that too, you come to with that, I think, kind of a consequences. It's more of that creating that isolation and lack of role models for, women to see themselves in those roles. So um the last thing I'll say real quick on, where I think there's still specific challenges, and I think again the pandemic kind of messed with it, is the work-life balance. To me, you could look at it and go, no, the, pandemic created, more work from home opportunities, which I don't disagree with. It absolutely has. However, you can work from home, but you don't literally have a minute to like go to the bathroom, whether you're a woman or a man. So it's the same, situation. So, well, I think there are some amazing leaders out there who, will face that battle, for the work life, um, challenge. Like I know some amazing leaders. They'll take that and they will face it head on, right? They will battle to the end to make it a priority for their team, but they're a diamond in the rough. It's not the norm, it's more the exception. So I still think there's, a ton of opportunity for improving that.
In many of the great conversations that we had, Jennifer, you talked about the importance of educating everyone, including men, on the realities that women face in tech. And that's a little bit of what we're doing today, right? We're trying to educate and have people learn more about what it really means through your story. But when you are having those conversations, how do you recommend starting those conversations or having those conversations in a meaningful way? What are some of the best practices that you keep?
I mean, I try to have an open mind, right? And that might sound weird because I'm the one who's starting the conversation, but I think when you go into a conversation with an agenda of how you're going to check off, like, I'm going to educate, I'm going to get in there, I'm going to do this, it probably isn't going to go as well as you think it's going to go. I think going in with an open mind, going in with more of a positive outlook, and not necessarily what I say is right. And I know everything type of mentality, but going into it more of, having it be a conversation and really listening. I think when you really listen to where that person is at, it helps you to know how to educate them in the best way possible that is actually going to resonate, and have it not be necessarily your agenda. But again, and I think the other thing that I'll highlight is having a respect for other people's opinions. I think in our, at least I'll say in our world today, I think we've gotten away from being able to appreciate other people's opinions when it doesn't align with our opinion. Um, and I think that's sad. I think you learn the most from people when you can hear a different opinion. You don't have to agree with it, but at least being open-minded to hearing it. And I think that helps me then to be educated in different ways, to take into a different conversation, right? To be smarter in that from that standpoint. So um, I think it's just important to really have a positive outlook, an open mind, and not having an agenda where you think like you're gonna teach someone, right? That doesn't usually go very well. So
I love it. It's so beautifully articulated, so simple, but yet so hard to achieve, right? When we go into those conversations, it's so hard to go into it, you know, vulnerable, that it requires certain vulnerability to do what you just said, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's
Which
beautiful.
is not easy.
No,
No one enjoys being vulnerable, but yet at the same time, that's when you probably, will learn the most as well. So
yeah. Jennifer, you have your own podcast and you touch upon many of these important topics. Do you ever use that content that you have in your show as a recommendation to some of your colleagues on relevant topics?
absolutely. I mean, I think it's kind of how I live my life, to be honest. I mean, the reason we started that podcast, which is called Exiting the Comfort Zone, if anyone's interested and wants to enjoy some comedy and good information and life lessons. But really the idea what from that was taking lessons that we've learned from our journey. So it's myself being on the IT side, and then my partner in crime, Andy Ponto, who has grown up in marketing. And so it's really interesting looking at IT and marketing and seeing a lot of similarities when it comes to women and diversity. Like I always thought tech was horrible, like, oh gosh, it's hard to be, a leader in the women, being a women leader in IT. I talked to her and I'm like, yeah, marketing sounds just as bad. Like I don't think they don't discriminate as far as that is concerned across industries. So, but really, her and I kind of came together and said, let's do this. And initially, when I asked her to do it, she goes, "Why? Why would we do that?" And I said, "Why wouldn't we?" She's like, "Oh, okay." Like we're exiting our comfort zone by doing it. So, but yeah, I mean, we try to let the content and the topics really come from our personal lives. I mean, whether that's present or past, it's either a book I read that really, impacted me. So I want to bring that into the podcast. And same with Andy, right? She does a lot with mentoring and coaching high school athletes. And so she'll take stuff from that. And we just, someone had asked us, like, do you guys sit down and do a strategy? I was like, no, we're winging it. And we're honest about that in our podcast. Like we don't, it's to be real and transparent. And so taking those topics and using those as recommendations in our day-to-day life, absolutely. I mean, it not to sound too cheesy, but the content comes from our heart. So taking that to colleagues, friends, family, anyone who really needs it to help them, either grow, learn, feel heard, whatever the case might be. Yeah, I mean, it's been a great ride. We're hoping to, continue on. We did say we probably should sit down and talk about, like, we've had one guest on and she was amazing. It was so much fun, but it's hard finding, as you probably know, getting the timing right. So we're working on that. So we might sit down and strategize that. Otherwise, we still just let the content kind of come as it flows into our lives.
That's amazing, and I think that's how the best content comes around. At least the podcasts I like listening to are very free flowing, right? More like you can hear the thoughts coming out, out of people's minds, and I think that makes it more original and more enjoyable. That's something that it's super edited and like.
Yeah, definitely not. We're definitely not edited at all. We actually, I think when we first started, we did have like a couple. The topic was fake it till you make it. And so we had started it. We, hit start, and all of a sudden we're like, is it going? I don't, I'm not. Oh, and we're like, oh shoot, it's going. She goes, no, we're continue on. Fake it till you make it. I'm like, okay. I'm like, here we go. So, anyways, yeah, it definitely was something where, it is free flowing and there's not a lot of strategy behind it besides just sharing and hoping. We have gotten a couple of people who have reached out to us and said, I thank you for doing that, it really impacted me, or I needed to hear it that day. So we will continue. I mean, even if it's only two people that reach out, like, we'll continue it because we do think it is important.
And it's out there, right? And you never know when someone that needs to hear what you have been talking about will hear it, right?
Yeah,
You never know.
absolutely. And I think too, I mean, there is a small piece as well. I think I shared with you my dad passed away when, I was when my mom was pregnant with me. And so, there isn't a video. I mean, there's some, right? There's some of showing him, but I also do think, like I always think about how do I want to leave this world when I leave? Someday I
Yeah.
will. And if there's an opportunity to provide any impact that is out there, right? Someone hears today, someone hears it in 10 years. Um, I want there to be that, not just for everyone, but you also think about family and friends and things to that degree as well. So
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Now I am a leader in technology. What will be your advice to me and other leaders in technology on integrating empathy into our management style to better support diversity and inclusion? What are some of the things you saw, the good leaders that you saw when you were growing up, the leader that you are today, right? What are some of the recommendations?
that's a great question. For me, um, it's one of those things where the leader really has to want it, right? They have to want to really make a change and a difference. It's no different than like we're going to go from project to product. If you do not have the buy-in from the top leaders to make that transformation, you might do it, it may not be great. And so I look at diversity and inclusion the same light, right? If you have leaders that are like, it's important to do, we should probably do it, it's probably not going to go off great. So I think from a leader, you have to have the passion around it. Because when you have passion, right, it's like anything. If I have passion around running and how to be a better runner, I'm going to educate myself. I'm going to put a plan into place. I'm going to execute that plan. I'm going to hold myself accountable. It's no different when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So, as a leader, if it's something that you really want to incorporate into your workplace, be educated around it, have passion around it, seek to learn and understand where some of the systemic barriers still exist today, right? Taking that, create, you know, looking at it in your environment and saying, what are the barriers in my environment? Because it's going to be different in every environment that you go into. But then taking that and creating opportunities for women, whether that's fostering the support, putting together a mentoring program for younger women. Um, I think the other really big thing for leaders is, and it's interesting. I just talked to a colleague not too long ago, so timing relevant. And she was, or not a colleague, a past colleague, and she made the comment, "I just want to feel valued." Like really at the end of the day, I don't need a increase in pay. I don't need more PTO. I want to feel valued. And when women can feel valued and they can feel understood, they're going to be, again, it's the psychological safety that will come into play. And when that is in your environment, women are going to take more risks. They're going to share more ideas. They're going to speak up and feel safer when there is an issue to speak up about it. um and that takes time. It's not something that's it's not you put into place and be like, great, everything's good, I have this, it's in the environment, should just feed itself. No, you have to continually monitor and adjust and see. But I think doing that along with really creating, again, the work-life balance for women. um you know I had a different colleague reach out and ask me, like, it was a past coworker, and she and employee, and she had asked, we have 3 kids, she has 3 kids, like, how did you know when you were done? Like, I don't want work to dictate me having another child. And I was like, it just made me, I'm like, do men have that question in their head? Right? Maybe not, maybe not to the same extent. So to me, it's like creating that work-life balance for women that starts at the leadership level.
Very good. I'm taking notes and I will come back to this when I know. Um, let's talk about mentorship and sponsorship. What role do you think mentorship and sponsorship play in advancing the careers of women in technology? And how can organizations really encourage more of that?
Yeah. I think mentorship, um, not just in, I mean, definitely in the careers of women in tech, it is very important. I also think mentorship in general is important. Whether what for whatever role that you play in your life. I wish I had a really good response for why I've always seeked out mentors, but I always have. Like from, I look back, really early in my career, like mid 20s, there was a consultant that I was working with on a project, and she was in her early 50s. And so I just said, hey, I don't know if you've ever like been a mentor, but I kind of want you to mentor me. Would you be interested in that? And I think she was a little taken back by it, but she did. And it was very informal. It wasn't this like, okay, here's the checklist of things that we need to do in our conversation. It was more of, here's some struggles I'm having. Here are some things I don't know how to handle. Like, what would you do? And so her providing her, recommendations and what she's done in the past, but also her believing in me, right? I remember she made a comment. I was probably at that time, it was probably like early 30s. So she was mid to late 50s. And I was debating a career, you know, um, change. And she goes, I can't wait for the day that you can see the potential that you have. Because I see it. But the day that you see it is going to be really exciting. And I was like, I think that's a compliment. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna try to spin it that. And it was, right? But then, I went into a different career and I looked for the next mentor. And I look at those mentors today and I'm like, again, they helped shape me who I am today and help me shape to be a better leader in all capacities of my life, not just work. So I think it is very important that you have a special, whether it's a mentor or a sponsor, helping you advance your career, helping you advance in, again, whatever role that you really live in. I think it's crucial if you want to succeed and advance. I think it's important. I think how organizations can encourage more of it. Again, I'm going to go to the leaders. The leaders have to have that passion around that and want that, right? Again, it can't be just like a checkbox that they need to, say they did. I think it's, looking at your organization, whether that's small, like if it's small and you don't maybe have the people there to do a mentorship, encourage your employees, if they're looking for it, to look externally,
Yeah,
right? There's how many life coaches are out there today? I mean, it's like it's its own new industry.
yeah.
So the availability is there. So I think again, I think it starts with a leader and their want and desire of that. And then working, whether that's internally if it's small or big, or externally if it's small, to get that for the people who want it.
I love it. Jennifer, one final, very random personal question. What do you do when you are not working?
Well, I have three boys, so I love spending time and my husband. We love to travel. So every other year for Christmas, we do memories versus materials is kind of what I've coined it. And so we'll take a trip, just the five of us, but now I have a daughter-in-law, so it'll be the six of us this Christmas. But so traveling, spending time with them. I am very active. I love running and hiking. My husband and I just purchased a coffee shop in Door County, Wisconsin. So when I'm not working this job, I'm working to figure out the coffee industry and how to open up a coffee shop. So um, yeah, we've been pretty busy with that. It's funny. People are like, "Oh, that's so exciting." I'm like, "I hope so. I hope it is." It feels a little overwhelming right now, but I plummeted out of my comfort zone. I didn't exit. I like your skydive. I dove right out into out of my comfort zone.
It's scarier. Doing what you're doing is way more scary than doing skydiving. So tell me more about it. Are you, it's already functioning and you go there and it's,
No, so it's actually a kind of a cool story. So Door County, Wisconsin is where I had gone to high school and I'll say grew up. And so I'm, love the county. I love the people. I love the nature that exists there. It's a very slower pace, but it's a very seasonal touristy area. So May to October is a little crazy. And so this coffee shop, Leroy's Water Street Coffee, opened in 1993 by a gentleman named Ryan Leary. And he was 19 years old, and he also probably did not know what he was doing. So I have faith that we can figure it out. But yeah, so he opened in 1993, did a phenomenal job. During COVID, he wasn't able to reopen, so it has been closed since for the last, four seasons. And so he got to a point where he wanted to, move on to a new phase of his life. He reached out to us. We were one of five people. He didn't put it on the market. He just reached out to five individuals that he wanted to see if they had interest in purchasing it. And we were selected, and here we are, owners of Leroy's Water Street Coffee. So,
So next year in October, we should do an episode about how the coffee shop went and the season and everything you learned.
yeah, we could, I could even arrange it so that I'm there.
That
That would
would
be,
that would be amazing. That would be
yeah,
amazing.
that would be a ton of fun. That would be great. I'll hold you to it. I love it. I love the idea.
Done deal.
Okay.
Very good. Jennifer, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm already looking forward to our next episode. Thank you again for being here.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it and have really enjoyed the conversation as well.